Well, let's go ahead and just jump right in. Thanks everybody for being here today. We appreciate you taking an hour of your time this morning at the busy start of the semester. So we appreciate you spending some time with us, and we hope to share some information that will be very helpful to you all. In case there's somebody on the call that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Whitney Longnecker, and I am the Director of Study Abroad here on campus. We have a number of panelists and folks who will be speaking to you today. So we have Dr. Sukant Misra, who is our Vice Provost of International Affairs. Also, Dr. Sarah Pink, the Resident Director of the TTU Center in Sevilla. And then to round out the group, Adriana Ward, who is our Faculty-Led Programs Manager. So thank you again for being here. This webinar is specifically tailored for faculty who are leading programs during the summer of 2021. However, really any faculty member who intends to lead during 2021, whether that be during the fall semester or even beyond that into the coming academic year, you may also find this information helpful. So like I mentioned before, thank you for being here today. If you do have any questions throughout the session today, please feel free to use the chat function in this webinar. We will be monitoring the chat as well, but if you do have a question that you specifically want to ask, make sure that you use the question function, and we'll be having a look at that to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. If you do have any trouble with audio or hearing us, seeing the presentation, anything of that nature, please let either myself or Adriana know, because we'll be running the tech side of the session today. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Dr. Misra is going to start us off today with some comments about the current situation as it specifically relates to summer study abroad programming. So Dr. Misra, please start us off.
Very good. Well, again, I see there are about 20 plus people. I saw it somewhere. I can't see it anymore, but that doesn't matter. I saw 20 plus people. So I'm glad that you all have taken the time this morning to join us. We felt like there are some questions out there that needed to be addressed. So we decided to have this Zoom session today, so that we can maybe tell you where we are, what our thinking is at this point in time, and try to answer some of your questions. So I think the most fundamental question at this point in time that most of you have is whether we're going to have study abroad program offered in the summer. So at this point in time, as of today, I'm glad to report to you that the study abroad for summer is a go. So that's where we are today, but there's always a but in this circumstances right now. As we all know, that there are too many unknowns with regard to the virus, and it is too early to know what is going to happen to the virus situation worldwide, including the US. So summer, I think the first program that is offered during summer is mid-May, around mid-May. So that's still several months away. So we have no way of knowing what the situation is going to be come May. So that is the but. We'll be watching, we'll be keeping a very close eye on the circumstances, on the virus situation worldwide, and need to be mentally prepared for a cancellation within the next couple of months. I mean, that is something that we just have to keep that option open. There's no way we can guarantee today that no matter what, there is going to be a study abroad program during the summertime. But as of today, given what we know today, I'm going to tell you that we plan to offer study abroad offerings in the summer. So that probably leads to a couple of other questions that you might have, and that is about any expenses that you incur between today and say end of March, assuming that we'll make a final decision on this by end of March. So what I'm going to tell you, as always, if we cancel the programs, if the university cancels the program, all non-refundable deposits will be reimbursed. So I chose those words very carefully. Non-refundable deposits. So what we're suggesting, or we're asking you, is to not incur any expenses other than the deposits until the end of March. I understand that some of you are anxious to make airline reservations or hotel accommodations or housing accommodations. Um, there are just too many uncertainties at this point in time for you to make that kind of investment, non-refundable investment at this point in time. If you do decide to move forward with maybe hotel accommodation or housing accommodation and airline tickets, then please choose refundable options. Otherwise, just wait until the end of March to make those arrangements. I think, if you wait until the end of March, you still have at least 6 weeks before you actually have to travel. So I feel like that is sufficient time for you to make hotel and airline hotel accommodations and airline reservations. But if you don't think that's the case, then go ahead and incur those costs that are and keep those refundable. So that's kind of where I am. That's all really I wanted to talk about today in my remarks, but I'm available to take any questions, answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Misra. While we wait for questions from the attendees, we did have a few questions that were submitted in advance. So let's start off with those, and then we'll see if that leads to any other questions. So let me see here. So one question that we got surrounds recruitment of students. And I think maybe the way to pose the question is there kind of a standard message of sorts that we should all be sharing and the faculty should be sharing when it comes to trying to recruit students for summer programs?
Yes, the answer is yes. Did I get your question right, or so you want to pose it again?
Yeah, yes, we are recruiting students, but I think the question surrounds there is difficulty recruiting students now because of hesitation of students to make any commitments of study abroad or to study abroad because of the continued cancellations. So is there a consistent message that you would like faculty to share other than, yes, summer study abroad is moving forward, to encourage students to still consider study abroad opportunities?
Yeah, well, I think the message that needs to be shared with the students is what I just shared with you. We need to be very clear about it. We need to make it extremely clear that at this point in time, given what we know, we feel like the study abroad program for the summer is going to happen. But if circumstances change, we will not hesitate to cancel it. And we'll reimburse you for all non-refundable deposits if you have incurred that. That needs to be crystal clear. There's no ifs and buts there. That is what it is. And I think most people will understand the rationale behind that position at this point in time. People need to understand, the students, faculty, all of us need to understand the safety and security of our students and faculty are of paramount importance to us. But at the same time, we also understand that if we cancel the program today, then many of our students will be deprived of the opportunity to study abroad, to have a life-changing experience. So we don't want to take this too lightly. It's too critical of a decision for us to make, and we do need to try to make it happen. We need to try as hard as possible to make it happen because it is something that is life-changing for our students. So, I mean, there's really nothing hidden about it, secret about it, or uncertain about it. What I said is what it is. At this point in time, we're trying extremely hard to make it happen. Given the circumstances, given what we know today, we think we'll make it happen. But if things change, we need to be mentally prepared to protect our students and our faculty and cancel it. And we just need to be mentally prepared for it. So the messaging to the students should be exactly what I just said.
Very good.
And I understand that some of the students and some of our faculty, some of us don't want to take the risk or tolerate the uncertainty surrounding this decision. And we understand that. We appreciate that. If a student is in a position to not be willing to take the risk or not willing to make a commitment given the uncertainties, obviously we understand that. We appreciate where the student is coming from. And hopefully, maybe they just need to postpone their plan to study abroad.
Very good, thank you. We've had a couple of questions come in about vaccines, and that was a question that was received in advance of the session today as well. So will the vaccine be required of students or faculty leaders? And then another question that we had come in before the webinar was, does leading a study abroad program bump me up in the line to get a vaccine?
Yeah, well, that is, again, another difficult question to answer. Because, as you all know, we don't have enough supply in Lubbock for the vaccines to be given to the first two groups of people at this point in time. So the city is not making a commitment with regard to when vaccines will be available to the university. So right now, whatever is available is given to those, those two groups of people that have been identified as most risky. So if we go ahead and say that vaccine is going to be required, then we'll have to have the vaccine available, or have to have some kind of arrangement with the city to make the vaccines available to the students and faculty who are studying abroad. And we don't have the assurance at this point in time that vaccines will be available. So yes, we'll highly, at this point in time, again, everything at a point in time. At this point in time, given what I know, given what we know, we do want to urge our students and faculty to be vaccinated before they leave. But I don't know that we can say that it's required at this point in time because I don't know anything about the supply. But we'll continue to work with the city. We'll continue to work with the Health Sciences Center. The university is already working with the city. And if the university gets a shipment of the vaccine, then I'm going to urge the central administration to make it available to students and faculty who will be studying abroad in the summer. But at this point in time, I don't know that I can say that it'll be required because I don't know that it's going to be supplied. What was your second question?
Does leading a study abroad program bump me up in the line to get a vaccine?
Well, if we have supply, yes, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get the university to prioritize students and faculty who will be studying abroad in the summer. But I can't pose that question at this point in time, knowing that we don't know whether we're going to have supply or not. But as I said, we have talked about it. I've talked to with the provost about it, and I have posed that question to him, and he knows that that could be something that we'll be asking for. But the first thing first, let's see if the university will be designated as a licensed site for vaccination, if we're going to get a shipment, and then we'll see if we will do whatever we can to prioritize students and faculty who are going abroad to get the vaccination.
Very good. I see that there's a question in the chat specifically about recruitment. And I know that we have a number of faculty who are on the call as well, who may be able to contribute their own specific strategies related to recruitment. So please feel free, everyone, to chime in and respond specifically to that chat question. We did have one additional question that was submitted in advance of the webinar, so I'll pose that now for you, Dr. Misra. Can you please talk a little bit about some of the factors that the university is considering when it makes decisions about study abroad programming and whether or not to move forward?
We are looking at multiple factors. You know, the most obvious factors are the caseload at the destination locations. So number of cases that are taking place, and the availability of vaccinations, hospital care. So those are the things, those are the first most important things that I look for when I make a recommendation about even international travel. And those are the same things that I am looking at in deciding the future of study abroad. And then, of course, the other obvious factors are travel restrictions and the practicality of those restrictions. For example, now many of the countries that we're looking at, including the US, that require a test 3 days, within 3 days of travel time. And so we are thinking about the practicality of it. Is it possible for our faculty or students to have that test done and results available to them within 3 days of their travel? And then the other thing that we're looking at is, again, the country-specific restrictions that are put in place. You know, some of the countries, many of the countries right now require a quarantine time of 7 days. So we're looking at those. And now in the last 3-4 days, we have started thinking about and looking at the different variations of the virus that are coming out and the caseload of those at our destination countries. So those are some of the factors that I look at very carefully before I make a recommendation to the provost and the president. And then I think you should know that the president, the provost, and even to some extent myself, look at some of the other take some of the other considerations in account, like in terms of what would the students feel about a decision like that? How much risk we're exposing the students to, the parents. I know we get mixed signal from the parents and the public and the legislators. So we take all of those into consideration as well, but most important considerations are data-based. You know, what's the caseload? What is happening? What is the hospital care or, you know, care situation in target countries? The restrictions that are imposed by the government, and the practicality of some of the restrictions and the amount of risk that we are exposing our student and faculty to.
Very good, thank you. We had one question come in. Study abroad programs often utilize group travel and lodging that do not easily accommodate social distancing. Are on-campus social distancing requirements likely to be imposed upon study abroad environments? I can speak to that a bit. So we have developed COVID-specific protocols and requirements for our partners and specifically, for example, the Seville Center. So we are actually already working in advance with our partners and with our locations overseas to help ensure social distancing and make sure that students feel comfortable in their lodging, for example, the accommodations, classroom space, things of that nature. We are, of course, keeping in mind the requirements of Texas Tech University, but also the specifics of the country or the location where the students may be at. So we're balancing all of those factors to make good and safe decisions for our students and for our faculty. We can drop a couple of links into the chat here in a bit that outline the specifics of our COVID protocols for the Seville Center specifically, and then also our requests for our partners and things that we want them to be mindful of when they are helping us to prepare for programming for Texas Tech students. So I'll go ahead and put those in the chat here in a bit so that way you can review those specifically. We also had a question about vaccination rates and specifically for Sevilla. I thought, Sarah, maybe you might want to jump in on that one to talk about the current environment in Spain.
Yeah, sure. I can jump into that. The vaccination is going more slowly in Spain and most of Europe than it is in the US right now. So the vaccination rate in Spain overall is, I think, at like only 2.7%. And we don't know. It's a little bit uncertain as to when it's going to pick up. I mean, I'm hearing very contradictory stories. I mean, today, for example, I heard I talked to someone when I dropped my daughter off at school this morning who works in the hospital here. She was telling me that they're almost done vaccinating all the healthcare workers, and she thinks any day now they're going to be moving on to the elderly. But then I looked at the newspaper, and the newspaper said they were going to be starting on March 22nd with the elderly. So I mean, that's a huge difference, almost 6 weeks, really, time frame there. So there's just a lot of unknowns, but it is going slower.
Yeah, that is another factor that we are also considering. And the reason, again, this may not be very realistic, but my hope is in another couple of months, by end of March, we'll have a better idea of the vaccinations available or that are available in our destination locations. What Sarah just mentioned is what is happening right now. And people don't exactly know where we're going to be in another 3 to 4 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, because people don't necessarily have a clear idea of how many vaccines can be manufactured, can be produced by these companies that are providing the vaccines right now, Moderna and Pfizer. But there are also a couple other vaccines that are in the process of being finalized. So it is possible that the supply can be considerably enhanced within the next 4 weeks. So if that does happen, if there are a couple of other vaccines available in the market and Pfizer and Moderna are in a position to increase their production as they think they will be able to, then maybe there'll be enough vaccinations available in the market. So that's another reason for us to, kind of keep an eye on this for another couple of months. And of course, I understand that after March 31st, maybe it's going to be too late to make any cancellation decisions because people would have already made all kinds of commitments for housing and airline travel and all of that. So maybe that's the time when we'll be looking at all these things and March 31st around that time, see where we are. And if some of these factors are favorable in nature, then proceed with the plan as it is today.
We have 3 additional questions that have been asked. So currently a negative COVID test is required when returning to the United States. How will testing of teams abroad be coordinated, and what happens if there is a positive test?
Coming into the US, right now, the travel restriction, the expectation is you have to have a negative test within 3 days of boarding the flight. So we'll have to, I don't know exactly how we're going to do this at this point in time. If that expectation is in place during, toward the end of summer, then we'll have to make arrangement for that, and we will have to work with the local authorities to make sure that is coordinated by our staff, particularly in Sevilla. The provider programs and the partner programs, they will have to make those arrangements, and we'll obviously ask those questions and make sure they have mechanism in place to make it happen. But for the center, our staff, Sarah and her staff, will make sure that process is coordinated and the students have the option to get tested before they leave the country. But we have not looked into the details of that requirement at this point in time.
Will the minimum number of students by program be the same as previous years? I can chime in a bit on that one. So all of our study abroad courses are subject to the same enrollment requirements as what we have on campus, which is a minimum of 10 undergraduate students and 5 graduate students. As in previous years, there is still the opportunity to work within your college or your department to seek approval for low enrollment. And we have had many study abroad courses over the years who have been successful in obtaining that approval and allowing the program to go with low enrollment. So I am assuming that the colleges and the departments will be just as willing to approve those kinds of requests now, and in the same way that they have done in the past. Anything that you would want to add to that, Dr. Misra?
No, I think that's fair. I will tell you that request for classes with less than minimum enrollment has been generally looked at very favorably by the provost office. That doesn't obviously mean that it's always going to be that way. But what I have observed over the last several years, the provost office looks at those requests more favorably than requests that come generally. So, I mean, that's just an observation, and that's the reason for that is we all feel like study abroad is a priority for our students, and we try to make whatever relaxation possible to make it happen.
Is there a deadline for the decision on going or not going on study abroad?
Right now, I'm going to say March 31st.
One thing that I will emphasize on this as well is that the application and commitment deadlines that we have for the student side of this decision will hold firm. And so for most programs, our summer application deadline is March 1st, and students need to commit by March 22nd. And we need to hold firm on those deadlines because we need to know, what the student interest is and how many students would like to participate on your programs. So, and that information will be useful for Dr. Misra and the university administration to make these final decisions about study abroad for summer programming. So please encourage your students to continue moving forward with their application and do so in a way so that way we know of their interest in participating.
Whitney, you polled several universities, our peer institutions. How many universities did you contact about it?
I have been in touch with all of our peers within the Big 12, as well as a number of institutions within the state of Texas. And then there's quite a bit of polling going around just within the study abroad community in general, with institutions all across the US regarding summer decisions.
And my understanding is, I don't remember how many institutions you looked at, but my understanding is 2 of the 10 or 12 that you contacted have already canceled their program for the summer.
Correct.
But the rest of them are still our same boat we are in.
Correct.
And I've actually talked to a couple of those universities, my counterparts at those universities, and I can share with you that they're all in the same boat. They're all hoping that they can make it happen. And they're all looking at kind of end of March type of time frame to make a final decision.
Mm-hmm. So we have one final question that has been posed for now, and so we'll answer that and then kind of transition to a slightly different topic, but something that we want you all to be thinking about as well. So the question here is, assuming programs go forward, is there likelihood that budgets will increase if, for example, students need to be lodged in more rooms, or we need more buses, coaches to allow for social distancing purposes? So I can say that in the faculty-led programs specifically that we've worked with and have asked for these COVID specific protocols, we've really seen kind of a mix. So unfortunately, some of the program budgets are higher than we have seen in previous years, but for some, we really didn't see too much of a difference in the price. So I would say it really kind of varies depending on the location and the, what the program includes and things of that nature. Sarah, do you want to speak to any specifics about that for Sevilla?
Yeah, so we've already done our budgets with the COVID protocols in place. And so, yeah, some things have gone up, but other things have gone down. For example, for the summer, we've taken out overnight excursions. We've taken out hotel stays for the summer because we just don't, have a lot of questions about social distancing and group meals, whether that will be possible. So we're substituting with a lot more local activities. So those are a little bit cheaper. So maybe where we, have had to increase the budget in some areas, we've decreased it in others. So it's been a little bit of a wash. I don't think that our programs in Seville have really changed much in price because of the protocols.
The cost is definitely something that we're keeping in mind and, trying to be as conservative as we can be with the pricing, because we know that that's a big decision factor for our students is the price of the program. It looks like we have answered all of the questions that have been posed for the time being. So thank you, Dr. Misra, for being here today and sharing that good information with the audience. We appreciate it.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much again, all of you. Thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we were able to answer some of your questions. And of course, there are some questions we are not in a position to answer at this point in time. In those cases, hope you understand the predicament that all of us are in at this point in time. But thank you for your interest, and thank you for working with us on this particular uncertain situation.
We do
Okay, we'll
appreciate it.
talk to you all later on. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Misra. So we are going to transition to a related but somewhat different topic, and I will let Sarah take the lead on this. But while she has a couple of slides that she will be sharing, so I'll let her get those organized for you and get those shared. But really what we want you all to be thinking about is how we can continue to ensure or offer the international education experiences. Sarah, we can see your email, not the PowerPoint, if that.
Oh, sorry.
So like I was saying, what we want to ensure is that we are still able to offer international education experiences to our students, even if they look different. And as we just heard from Dr. Misra, you know, there's still many factors, many variables in the decision-making process for summer programming or even programming beyond that particular term. So we really want you to be thinking about how we can, again, still offer this same kind of experience and still offer our students the opportunity to gain some of those very important skills that, that they do achieve in a travel-based program. But how do we do that if travel is not allowable at this time? So Sarah has some information about a pilot program that is a virtual study abroad program, and we hope that this will be useful to you all as you think about, you know, what things that you could incorporate into your program or changes that you could make, so that way we can still continue these really great opportunities for our students, even if travel is not allowable. So this is kind of a potential plan B that we all need to be thinking about. And this is important not just if the university does ultimately decide that summer travel is not recommended, but also we need to be really thinking about a plan B, because you yourself may find yourself in quarantine during your study abroad program. Your students may find themselves in quarantine for one reason or another. And so we really need to think about how we can still continue with the objectives of the program, but perhaps do so in a different way. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Pink to discuss that a bit more.
Okay, thank you, Whitney. Can you see the proper slide now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I just have a few slides that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to talk about two main points. The first thing that I'm going to talk a little bit more to, although we've talked about it a lot already, is sort of what to expect as faculty leaders of study abroad programs during this next year, and then also about virtual study abroad. A lot of people have questions, you know, to what is that, and I'm going to try to help you visualize what that may look like and what we're doing here now to see how you could possibly transition to a program like that, if that's something that, you know, would work for you and it comes to that. So, you know, a lot of this stuff we're very familiar with already, right? You know, this year we know is going to look different. If we think it through, it's very hard to plan, as you know, evidenced already in some of the things that we've talked about. You know, starting with those speculative dates of vaccination, really. You know, if people start getting vaccinated here next week versus March 22nd, more widespread, that's going to make a big difference in our planning. But the bottom line is that we just can't say for certain right now how the next few months are going to play out. What we can do, however, is a lot of planning and anticipation of a wide range of different scenarios. But no matter how much planning we do, we might get hit with something, and we probably will get hit with something that we haven't, you know, thought of or that surprises us. But at least at this point, we all have enough experience with that in pivoting quickly and being able to react. So it is important for you both as faculty, but also to transmit to your students that different areas of the world are really dealing with a common problem in different ways. Just to give you an example about Spain, you know, how things have been here in the last few months. You know, mask wearing has been very strict, and that will likely continue for some time. However, schools have remained open in person. But there are strict restrictions on our movement and on curfews and things like that. But for example, we haven't seen quarantines here, strict, like government controlled quarantines as other countries have seen. You know, we've already talked about the vaccination a little bit. It's happening a little bit of a slower pace here. And the goal is to have 70% of the population vaccinated by the summer. By the summer, that really means here July and August. But there is really still a lot of debate as to whether or not this is realistic. And so, you know, it's going to be crucial to see what, you know, happens here in the next few months. But one thing, there have been some programs that have sent their students abroad. There have been students in Spain this year and in other parts of the world. And those students are really, you know, doing study abroad with all the different kind of new norms that we're seeing everywhere. And those students have overwhelmingly felt very comfortable in their host countries, sometimes even safer than they felt in the US. So, you know, that is something that we can consider. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. These are just a few possible scenarios, and you probably thought about a lot of these as study abroad faculty leaders. But in study abroad, we've spent an inordinate amount of time this year preparing for the unexpected, really going through every possible scenario that has occurred to us. We really thought we were going to have students here in January until kind of last minute. So we really looked at everything kind of in a systematic fashion. And that's taught us a lot about some of the things that may come up, some of the possible scenarios that you know, you could think about. You could think about how you would react if you're faced with any of these possibilities. You know, we know about the current border restrictions, but we really don't know what new ones might look like. Will they ease up? Will they crack down? TTU is working closely with the Houston consulate to ensure entry into Spain for our program participants. But, you know, some of that is just really out of our control as far as new border restrictions that could come up, or, you know, things could just ease all of a sudden at the last minute. Again, we know exactly what the quarantine and testing requirements are today, but these may change and we have to be ready for possible changes. In Spain right now, I will say that to come into the country, you have to have a PCR test done in the 72 hours before arrival. Now, that PCR test is not the rapid test. So it's something that's a little bit harder to get, and it takes more planning, especially to do it kind of in the time frame that it needs to be done. There is talk that they may start allowing the rapid test, but as of today, it has to be a PCR test. Once again, the question about vaccinations, will they be required for international travel, and at what point? There is no quarantine requirement currently for Spain, but Great Britain in the last week has changed their quarantine requirements. So, you know, all of that could happen. Kind of the next point here that you see is the different and changing local regulations. In Spain, they change weekly, bi-weekly, by municipality, and there are thousands of municipalities in Spain, so it's sometimes hard to keep up with all of the changing requirements, but that's kind of the new world that we're living in. And we did talk about this already a little bit. The program activities on study abroad will be organized differently. You know, study abroad is typically a very social activity, but we're required by law, I think stricter in the US, and at least in our case, to enforce a lot of local requirements. You know, for example, right now we can't have gatherings of more than 4 people. A month ago it was 6 people. That makes group meals and large tours a lot less viable. But we have spent a lot of time coming up with alternatives for those activities. You know, we've adapted a lot of our cultural activities. We had adapted the orientation so that students would go straight to their host families and eat the meals with them, yet arrange all of the same orientation activities differently, but just by cohort. So this summer, we're likely to see some of that kind of reorganization to try to incorporate as much as possible with maintaining, you know, all of the kind of changing regulations. You know, and just added flexibility, you know, with the kind of more local take on activities and things, that gives us, and it gives you as faculty leaders, more flexibility to kind of make last minute changes. The other thing really to keep in mind, and Whitney touched on it already, is that you do need to be ready to go online at any time, not just for like a total, cancellation and the possibility of a virtual study abroad, but what if all of a sudden there's a quarantine and the first few days here in country, you have to teach online. There's not a lot of time in the summer for, a week of wasted class time or just kind of waiting. What happens if there's a positive case in the group, or what if one person has to self-isolate? What if you have to self-isolate? What if there's a change in local activities permitted? All those sort of things. And then kind of the last question here, the last point is about possible travel disruption. Travel has become a lot more complicated with the new laws and requirements, and they're not always clear. For example, on their way to Spain, some US students with layovers in the UK had trouble being cleared for travel to study in Spain, even though legally they could come to Spain. So kind of our biggest piece of advice right now would be to avoid layovers in third countries, to avoid another additional layer of regulations and requirements, and just know the regulations and requirements, cross your T's, dot all your I's, and insist that your students really do the same. So I can't see the question, so we can kind of talk about it at the end, I guess, if anybody has any questions. So now I'm going to move on to the idea of the virtual study abroad. We are moving forward with the travel-based program, but given the uncertainty of the situation, we have been developing virtual study abroad options as an alternative to travel-based programs in case we should need them. So kind of the first question here is what is virtual study abroad? Isn't that a misnomer? How do you even do that, right? But what we've seen is that we can actually bring in a lot of the elements of the local environment into a virtual classroom. And so we kind of ask, how can we provide as much of the learning experience that a study abroad student would get in a virtual format? And there are a lot of things that can be redesigned. Obviously it is better to travel if you can do that, but it might not be possible, and not all students can wait to try again next year, if something gets canceled. They've perhaps design their degree plan around this summer or this particular semester, have specific classes or have received scholarships or financial aid. And so while yes, traveling would be better, it would perhaps be in a lot of these students' best interest to kind of continue with their plan. What happens to colleges that have a study abroad requirement, but the student and their family isn't comfortable with international travel at the moment? So it kind of, brings some options to the table. So one of the things that I'm going to go through here is our pilot study abroad program. We have piloted a Spanish program for this spring, and it's the Spanish 1607 program. And I'm just going to show you kind of to get an idea of what it looks like, and you can kind of think about how you could perhaps adapt your program if you decided to do that. So the program that we're doing now is a 12-hour program of foundational Spanish. So it's quite intensive. These students are taking a heavy course load over the course of the semester. So they have 3 hours of daily synchronous programming. And the class material has been highly adapted. A lot of work has gone into this, and a lot of work, as all of you who have flipped to online know, it's more work than teaching in person. So we're using a flipped classroom environment so that all of the class time is really interactive, and the professor is kind of a facilitator and coordinator of all of the activities. So if anybody wants to kind of talk through, class details, Jonathan Dean, who's the assistant director here, is teaching this class now, and I'm sure he would be very happy to, kind of go into detail with any of you about some of the components. We are bringing a customized cultural component into the class, as well as we're using language assistance via Zoom breakout rooms. I'm going to kind of move on to the next slide. So that's kind of snapshot of the program that we're doing now. But in thinking of other programs, what you could do, you know, we can do cultural tours, all of our standard cultural tours of the cathedral, the Real Alcázar, Italica, etc. We're doing video tours and explanations, interactive videos. There are possibilities of live Q&A sessions with local experts, with us, or with local experts kind of your choosing. We have a list. We've come up with a list of over 40 activities that we could use for virtual study abroad. And we can really create kind of a customized experience or even learning units. We could have interactive videos of neighborhood tours, and we could embed, and Jonathan is actually doing this in his class right now with activities embedded into these virtual tours. For example, an example of a module could be food, right? And we could cover all kinds of things as eating out, groceries, markets, traditional foods, or you could just say, I just want a little kind of 20-minute thing in general about food. Don't want to go too in depth to that, you know, into that subject. Flamenco workshops, we could arrange custom company visits and Q&A sessions. We could devise customized visits that you would want to do. And one of the other things too, you know, you saw that we were using the language assistants in the Spanish class. We have enough language assistants that speak English that we could try to mimic somewhat, you know, the non-classroom portions of study abroad, you know, because kind of these visits and things are the tours we normally do with our students anyway. But how could we give them the experience of kind of getting to know people and getting to know the culture? Well, we could have, you know, facilitate small group conversations with locals, and we could do that in a very structured format or kind of a more relaxed format. There are a lot of different ways that we could do that, but this is just kind of to give you an idea of some things that we could do. And if you have any questions, here are our email addresses, so feel free to contact us as things come up. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see questions.
Thank you, Sarah. We had a couple come in through the chat, and I was kind of responding as we go. We do have another question. Will this presentation be made available to us? Yes. We have been recording the session, so we'll make the recording available, but we can also present the slides specifically if you're wanting just to look at those a little bit more closely to look about the options here. So we do have a few minutes left, and we are happy to answer any additional questions, or if you want to talk you know, a little bit more specifically about some of the options that might be available through a virtual setting, please, you know, we can start those conversations now, even if you would like. But kind of like I was saying before is, you know, we need to be prepared, and we want to be prepared for as many of the obstacles that this ongoing global pandemic can or will throw at us. And in study abroad, and I'm sure you all as well in your own work at Texas Tech have come to, you know, have plan A through F prepared as we all continue to navigate COVID. And so we really want to make sure that we start this conversation early about alternative options, because we may find ourselves in a situation in a couple of months where the in-person programming that we have all prepared for may not be possible for one reason or another. So we hope that you find this information helpful and just something to kind of keep rolling around in your mind. We are here to support your efforts and your continued work in providing international education options to our students. And we want to continue to do that regardless of the ongoing pandemic or other obstacles that may be in our way. So thank you very much for joining us today. Like I said, the three of us will stay on today. If you would like to chat with us, we're happy to do that. If you would like to unmute and ask a question verbally, just use the raise your hand function, and we can allow you to do that. But for those of you who may not have any questions, I'll say thank you, and we'll leave it there. And please be in touch if you do have questions later, or if you want to start thinking about alternatives and making those plan Bs. So thank you, everybody.
I already type it, but my concern is because from the College of Engineering viewpoint, I'm sorry, we take our students not only teach it because we can teach the same class here in Texas Tech campus, but to create a global citizenship and to give them experience, take them out of their comfort zone and expose to the different culture. And I'm not against the virtual, don't take me wrong. I mean, if I am a college student, I would love to go learn, and by seeing, I know we are in a difficult situations, but how can we really convince the students or provide them this cultural global citizenship with virtual tours? Because I can sit here, watch everything whole day. I don't need to pay for extra, to take an international study class. That's my concern.
Sure. No, that's a very valid question. Thank you for bringing that forward, Mukaddis. So the whole idea of a virtual study abroad program is admittedly new. It's new to Texas Tech. As Sarah mentioned, we have the first pilot program happening right now during the spring semester, but also I would say it's new to most higher education institutions and has really grown as an opportunity because of the ongoing pandemic. So we fully acknowledge that a virtual program is not the same as a travel-based program, but we are excited about the opportunities that it may provide because like I said, our goal is still to continue that international education opportunity and experience, even if travel is not available. And I think there's some real opportunities even beyond the pandemic, because we all know that there is a certain group of students who, for whatever reason, just are not able to study abroad. Maybe they have other commitments or, a family or something of that nature. So the idea of a virtual program offers even future opportunities for students who may not have otherwise thought about an international experience. So I think that there's a lot that we are already learning from the virtual program that's happening right now. I'm sure there'll be a lot more that we will learn as the semester goes on. But really the way that we see this is that this can be a way to kind of enhance the opportunities that students have, particularly for the summer. What we have heard from the university and from the administration is that many of the classes that will be offered this summer locally, not just in a study abroad fashion, will be online. And so we really see this as an opportunity to enhance the learning of students who may be studying using online classes anyhow. And although the connections and the experience, like I said, will be different, we still think that there'll be value in some of the added components, the cultural connections, things of that nature. So hopefully that kind of helps.
Like it's easier for Spanish class. But what about if it's some engineering fluid mechanics class? How I'm going to add to the cultural concept into the fluid mechanics? Again, that's just, I'm asking, something comes to my mind, like that will be a little difficult, isn't that?
We have actually kind of started some preliminary conversations with the College of Engineering for that very same reason, because I think you're right. Some of the classes that are offered on study abroad programs lend themselves more naturally to the addition of those cultural components. But just like you have found in the many programs that you have led, adding those cultural components to a very content-heavy class is still possible. It might just require a little bit more creativity, and that's, I think, the very same thing that we'll see in these virtual experiences as well. We might just have to get kind of creative and think about how we can still do this in a way that's intentional and makes sense for the students, but allows them to get that cultural experience and introduction.
Thank you.
Sure. If there are any others who want to unmute, just use that raise your hand function and we'll be happy to answer. It looks like there's a question that we have in the chat. Would it be possible for the faculty to go and teach online from Seville? If so, how will the study abroad, is this a study abroad program? How will the cost be calculated? So I guess I think I need more information about this, Jaime. I'm going to allow you to unmute if you can maybe describe a little bit more about what you were thinking with the question here. Is this a situation where the students couldn't travel, for example, or more general kind of question?
Yeah, that's the idea is what if we don't have enough students going or parents don't want to risk the situation. If the students can stay here and be exposed from faculty being in Spain through videos or through, the class is the same here as there. So some of them would need the class.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them will, what we're thinking about if the program is canceled is to offer the class from here, so students have that class to graduate. Mm-hmm. But some of them will, was thought about a kind of different experience. So it's when you're talking about study abroad online, is something like that somebody from abroad is teaching from there and the students from here can access there, or?
That is actually a model that we have thought about and considered. So that could be possible. And I like that the fact that you're thinking about the academic continuity. That's something that I didn't mention but should have, is that, in addition to wanting to continue to offer these types of experiences, even if done in a different way, we also want to make sure that students still have the chance to take these classes, because you're right, some of the students do need them to graduate and to carry on with their studies. The one thing that we would need to be mindful of that comes to my mind right off the top of my head when we're thinking about this model is that there is some financial aid implications. If, for example, you have some students who are enrolled in the class and are taking part in the study abroad experience and some who are not. So we would have to kind of think through exactly how that would work and how the classes could be set up so that way we're not, in violation of any of those financial aid or scholarship policies. But that is definitely a model that we have considered as we've thought about the different potential travel restrictions and things of that nature as we've weighed the options here.
Okay, because I've been talking to my department chair and he was kind of suggesting if that would be a possibility. Well, it's something in between. What if we don't have enough students going and they still want to make that experience? But I didn't know how to answer that. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's possible that if a faculty goes there, teach from there, and give through videos or whatever material they have, send it back here, and the students have been exposed to some sort of study abroad, and that would be better than teaching the class directly here.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, Jaime, just in thinking about your program and the things that you do with the students, I think that a lot of those places are good possibilities for building some virtual activities, some tours perhaps of some of those facilities, meeting with the people from the different companies, having the Q&A possibilities with your students. So I think that those activities you do kind of lend themselves to possibly be restructured in that way.
Okay, that's good. Thinking about that. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments that we can help with today? Just looking through the chat, and I think we've got all of those answered that have come in, so that's good. So maybe we'll leave it at that then for today. You know how to contact us if you do think of any questions, or if you leave and then this afternoon you think, oh, I should have asked that. You know how to get a hold of us. We're happy to help. We definitely want to be there and support you. We know that this is a very ambiguous and at times frustrating situation. We're in the same boat as you on that, and want to be supportive and helpful along the way. So please let us know if there's anything that we can do, and we appreciate your time in joining us today. We'll send out the recording, so if you need to refer back to anything that was mentioned, you'll have that in your inbox shortly. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Bye, thank you.